From the land of Grant University in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, this is the closing market report. It is the 22nd day of April 2026. It's Earth Day. I'm Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. Coming up, we'll talk about the commodity markets with Greg Johnson. He's at TGM, that's Total Grain Marketing, right here in Champaign County, Illinois. And then we'll turn our attention to the weather forecast. As we close out our time together, we'll talk with Drew Lerner at World Weather Incorporated in Kansas City. Along the way, I'll bring you up to date on some of the agricultural news for the afternoon, and I'll ask you to make a pledge of financial support to Illinois Public Media for the agricultural programming. Now, this is really important. We're in the third day of just 4 fund drive days for this spring. And we need you to call in right now. Don't wait. Do it at 217-244-9455 with your pledge of financial support. It is because of you that our programming exists here at Illinois Public Media. I cannot tell you enough how much we thank you for making this happen. But we need to continue the process. So call in right now at 217-244-9455 or go to willgive.org. That's WILL give.org to make that donation. If you want to make it as a sustainer, that would even be better. I have always said I like the $120 a year level. Less is fine. More is fantastic. You might try $240 or $320 or $640 or, well, you pick whatever number you want. But thank you. Thank you so much for making that donation right now, today. Again, 217-244-9455. That's 217-BIG-WILL is the number to call, or go to willgive.org. In either case, make sure you tell the person you're talking to or put into the comments section in support of agriculture.
Todd Gleason services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
Greg Johnson from TGM, that's Total Grain Marketing in Champaign, Illinois, now joins us. Hi, Greg. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it on a beautiful 22nd day of April. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, and you're right. We do get a nice day today and tomorrow, and then we get some rain forecasted on Friday, but at least we're going to get a little bit more planted between now and the next rain on Friday. So things are good.
I would imagine that you're not getting many calls because most producers are running pretty hard if they can get into the field at this time.
You're right. Although we did have a little flurry of selling of new crop beans, we got back up to the contract highs this morning, and so that generated a little bit more farmer selling of new crop beans. The old crop beans are still 50-60 cents off of their highs, but the new crop beans actually got within a quarter or a half cent of the old contract high this morning. So not a bad price for soybeans, and some farmers took advantage of that.
Yeah, I thought about that. This morning when I saw that number, I'm far enough along I probably didn't quite want to do that. But maybe because, there's always kind of one other bump in May, and this might be the early one. Who knows? But I'm wondering what you're watching in the marketplace at this point to give you signals as to which direction things might be headed.
Number one, obviously, is the Middle East. Crude oil prices are up another $3 a barrel. It sounds like the negotiations are on hold for a little while anyway. It changes daily, but today they're not scheduled for anything. And so crude oil prices are higher. That's led biofuels, soybean oil in particular, to new highs, and that's helped out the soybean price. So that's number one. And then I think that's probably the biggest factor right now. And as you said, the farmers are busy in the field, and they've sold a few beans already, and so they're just not as aggressive to sell more at this point. So lack of farmer selling is also helping out in the funds. Even though they've sold off a little bit here in the last week or so, they still maintain a very big long position in soybeans and a record position in soybean oil. So we've got all those factors working for higher prices. That's why we're as high as we are right now in the soybean complex.
I do want to talk about that record position in soybean oil, probably based off of the RVO, or the renewable volume obligations released by the Trump administration, which appear to be pretty aggressive, clearly for the fall of this year. At least I thought it was. And that's what we've been talking about, and then into next year. But as we were talking to Ben Brown, and you may have heard this on the Monday closing market report, FAPRI took a look at those numbers when they were thinking through their 10-year assessments, and they weren't so certain that there might be a surprise coming for bean oil at some point in the next 6 to 7 months. Do you suppose that the funds are long and rolling, and will they roll out of them if they finally realize what really the RVO is looking at?
I think that it could. I mean, you've got the RVO announcement. You've also got Trump meeting with Xi. That's still scheduled for May 14th. We've got a big crop coming out of South America. I think they're over 90% harvested, and most people for Brazil are in the 180 million metric ton camp. We think we're going to be planting more beans here in the U.S., even more so than what was released on the March 31st acreage report, because of the higher input costs. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that can change, and most of those would argue for lower prices. I mean, if there is a surprise in the RVO, it's hard for me to imagine that China is going to buy more soybeans other than just a token amount when Trump visits. So, with a big crop in South America, with more acres here in the U.S., and we know South America will probably plant another 1 million or 2 more acres of beans next spring or next fall. It's hard to find good news, but in the short run, the funds are in control and the funds are long, and so that's why we're at the price levels that we're at.
One final thing on soybeans before we switch gears. I'm wondering what you're thinking about acreage shifts, if at all, based on fertilizer availability and price.
I think we can see 85.5 million acres pretty easily. If I'm wrong, I think it could be higher than that. I think it'll be somewhere around 85.5 million acres, which is up almost 4 million acres from last year, a little higher than what USDA is using. And I just think that there was enough areas that did not get the inputs bought, and soybeans are, quite frankly, a cheaper crop to put in the ground. And so I think some farmers, either by choice or maybe by the choice of their banker, will be inclined to plant more soybeans than what they were thinking. I think I read an article, one of the county farm bureau presidents in southern Illinois normally was planning on going 50-50, and now he's going 100% beans. Now that's extreme, but I think there is some of that switching going on in areas that can't grow, the 240 type bushel corn yields. So in some of those not as productive areas, I think soybeans probably make a little bit more sense.
You're listening, of course, to the Closing Market Report here on this Wednesday afternoon. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason. We're joined by Greg Johnson. He's with TGM Total Grain Marketing. It is, and we'll take a pause for the moment, the third day of our spring fund drive. And Greg, we're doing really well, but farmers always step up for us, and they will. I know they have. Actually, I saw them do that again this morning during the opening market report here on our home station. It's important, though, that they do call in with their pledge of financial support at 217-244-9455. It's because of them, because of you, because of all the folks that are on the air with us, that so many people listen to the Closing Market Report and Commodity Week. You've been here for a couple of decades, I think, nearly at this point, like many of our analysts, long-term with us. And I know that you listen, you hear from people that listen too as well, and thank you for that. If you are dialing in right now, I kind of like the $120 level at 217-244-9455, $240, $320, $640, $40, $80, whatever. It works fine, but make sure you do give. It's quick, it's simple, it's easy. Discover, American Express, MasterCard. You can just tell them you're going to send a check. Either way, whether you're doing it online or in person by phone, make sure you tell them or put it into the comments section in support of agriculture. And thank you so much for doing that. And thank you too, Greg, for being with us each and every Wednesday. We really appreciate that.
Well, you're very welcome. And I just want to throw my 2 cents worth into farmers. Where else can you get this kind of information from? It's unbiased information. I mean, you can get information that you pay for and that farmers or that analysts have an axe to grind or a take on the market. But this is about as unbiased information as you can get from multiple sources. I think it's just a great source of information, and it doesn't cost anything. So this is the time to say thank you and support the local radio station for providing this kind of information.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate that. We probably should talk about corn. We haven't done that just yet. If you're at 85 and a half for soybean acreage, where do you put corn acreage?
94 and a half million planted. And if you use a trend line yield of 182, that gets you a 15.7 billion bushel corn crop. And if you cut demand a little bit, which I think we should, use about a 16 billion bushel demand, that gives you a drawdown of 300 million bushels in the carryout. This year's carryout is 2.1, so that puts next year's at 1.8. So assuming normal weather, that gives us an abundant carryout. So I think we're still in the mode to sell rallies, reward rallies, because 1.8 billion bushel carryout means that probably the fall price is lower than where we are today. Not that we can't go higher in the short run, but the general trend is probably lower. So unless we have a drought, 1.8 billion is more than enough corn to get by.
In that case, are you thinking producers should do more on new crop sales for corn?
If they haven't got anything sold, there's nothing wrong with getting offers in about 10 cents higher than where we are now. I don't know that we need to see $5 D's futures. We saw $4.97, $4.98 multiple times, and that's where we run out of steam. So if I was putting in offers, I would have offers in right below $5 in that $4.95 to $4.97 range. I think that's a good place to sell corn. And if we have normal weather this summer, that's going to look like a very good sale.
Hey, thank you much. I appreciate it. We'll talk with you again next week.
Thanks, Todd.
That, of course, is Greg Johnson. He's at TGM. That's Total Grain Marketing. Remember, keep dialing 217-244-9455 or go online at willgive.org to make your pledge of support to agriculture. In today's agricultural news, congressional leaders are signaling renewed momentum on a long-delayed farm bill as pressure builds from agricultural groups. Lawmakers from both parties say negotiations have accelerated, though disagreements remain over spending levels, conservation programs, and nutrition policy. Congress continues to operate under an extension of the previous law, leaving farmers uncertain about long-term support. According to Reuters, lawmakers are working through budget constraints while trying to preserve crop insurance and commodity programs. Political reports negotiations have intensified in recent days, with staff working toward a potential framework. And while the Farm Bill is front and center, the chairman of the House Ag Committee, G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, says ag labor reform is high on the priority list, too. He thinks that when the Farm Bill moves on to the Senate, the House will look to reform the H-2A program.
Well, sure. I think in the not too distant future, it'll be after this Farm Bill gets sent to the Senate, we'll be releasing for a discussion draft a bill that would really to modernize the H-2A program, make sure it works for year-round agriculture, something that increase access, some common sense changes to it.
Pushing visa reform over the finish line will not be easy, thinks Thompson, but it is long overdue. Here's one of the reasons why. Labor shortages continue to challenge U.S. specialty crop growers, raising concerns about production, harvest timing, and rising costs across the sector. According to the New York Times, some crops have gone unharvested due to worker shortages. The Los Angeles Times reported rising labor costs and limited workforce availability. The Western Growers Association says labor remains a top concern for fruit and vegetable producers, particularly in California. Now, the H-2A guest worker program has provided some relief, but remains costly and complex for many growers. The International Fresh Produce Association has called for reforms to improve access and efficiency. We'll stay in Washington, D.C., but switch gears. Debate over U.S. biofuel policy is intensifying ahead of the summer driving season as lawmakers weigh changes to blending requirements under the Renewable Fuel Standard. According to Reuters, ethanol producers are pushing for higher blending levels, while refiners seek greater flexibility. Now, Bloomberg says ongoing disputes over waiver policies and compliance costs are the issue. The Renewable Fuels Association believes expanded E15 use could boost corn demand and lower fuel costs for consumers. The Environmental Protection Agency is reviewing policy options as pressure grows from both sides. The American Coalition for Ethanol continues to advocate for year-round E15 access. Both the Biden and Trump administrations have granted year-round E15 in the last 5 years for summer usage. Congress is grappling with a more permanent solution. And finally today, it's Earth Day, April the 22nd. Farmers and gardeners are busier earlier than ever across the whole of the United States. In fact, in 2023, the United States Department of Agriculture released an updated version of the plant hardiness zone map. The previous update had been made in 2012. The 2023 map is based on 30-year averages of the lowest annual winter temperatures at specific locations. It's getting warmer across the nation, of course. The hardiness zones were moved about 60 to 70 miles northward. The new map incorporates data from more than 13,000 weather stations. And about 80 million American gardeners and growers use the USDA plant hardiness zone map, but there are others. For instance, USDA, RMA, or the Risk Management Agency uses the map's plant hardiness zone designations to set crop insurance standards. The scientists also incorporate the zones into research, things like modeling the spread of exotic weeds and insects. You may find and use the USDA Agriculture Research Service Plant Hardiness Zone Map online at planthardiness.ars.usda.gov. And that's a look at today's agricultural news. You're listening to the Closing Market Report on this Wednesday afternoon. Our theme music is written, performed, produced, and courtesy of Logan County, Illinois farmer who should be in the field this afternoon planting my field. I think I'll stop by there, in fact. Tim Gleason, thanks to him. And thanks to Drew Lerner as well, who's on the line now. He's at World Weather Incorporated in Kansas City because he helps make the programming here worth listening to each and every day, particularly on Wednesday. If you think that's the case, then dial in right now at 217-244-9455 or go to willgive.org and make that contribution. Drew, thank you for being with us again today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, I think it's a great idea to support you guys. There are only a few ag broadcasters out there with a program as good as yours, and I am honored to be a part of that, and I hope that your listeners recognize that as well. It's hard when you're sitting in a farm in Illinois or somewhere else nearby and have no idea really what it's like to get farm broadcast data or news in other parts of the country. And there are services out there, but certainly the one that you have generated for years, I don't know how long we've been doing this together, but I'm sure it's decades. And, it's an honor to be a part of that. But for sure, the information that comes out of your tank there is far superior and does cover it all. And I hope folks will support you because it's an important service.
They can do that, 217-244-9455. And thank you for the kind words. Or at willgive.org. Make sure that you tell the person on the other end of the line or put it in the comments section in support of agriculture. Now, I'm going to be a little worried. As you heard, Farms are being planted here, but that 45-day cycle you mentioned several times over the winter is coming up. Not this weekend, but the following one. Should we be worried about cold weather?
It's something that we need to watch for sure. And the reason why I say that is because it could end up being a fairly significant cold surge. But this far in advance, we really just don't know. And to be honest with you, if you asked me about this cycle last Sunday, I would have told you, hey, it may not show up at all. But all of a sudden on Monday, the second week of models were really starting to show a cold surge building up in Canada. And here today, it looks like it'll be in the Midwest as we get to the last days of April and on into the first days of May. It doesn't necessarily look like it's going to produce, all kinds of serious cold yet, but it is something that's evolving, and it has occurred with a great deal of rhythm. We saw this in late January and early February. This was the event that brought freezes to the Gulf of America coast and Florida citrus country. We saw those hard freezes and the widespread damage down that way. And then we saw it again, I think it was March 14th through the 17th. We saw freezes occurring down through the heart of the Delta and into the interior southeastern states with that surge. And that event ended up causing some replanting of corn in the lower Delta. And so I'm a little concerned that we may see this cycle repeat, as I've suggested, and we may be surprised how cold it might get. Now, I'm hoping that the air mass will be moderated enough that it won't be a big deal. And of course, earlier this week, we did have some impressive cold already occurring. And we did lose a bunch of apples. Actually, the flowering fruit trees in Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia all got whacked, and even southern New England. And so we're going to have a shorter apple crop. And there was a few areas of wheat and a few corn areas that also got nipped by that event. So we know this atmosphere, even though we're seeing 90-degree heat today across parts of the central and northern plains, this atmosphere is still capable of cranking out some cold air. And so we want to watch and see what happens in those last days of April and into early May. At the moment, I would just suggest that it's going to be colder than normal, but we'll have to wait until next week to talk about the details of that.
What do you see over the next 7 days as it regards planting across the Corn Belt?
Yeah, because the cold air is building up in Canada, we're going to see a succession storm systems marching across the Midwest. And it looks like we're going to see 3 waves of rain before that cold air comes in early May. So there will be some disruption to farming activity. We do have a lot of heat out there today, and it'll push into the Midwest tomorrow. But that's probably going to be the end of the hotter days, and we will gradually cool down after that. So drying rates between, let's say storm number 2 and 3 is probably going to be a lot slower than what we might see here this weekend. And so for that reason, we should anticipate a little bit of a slowdown in field work. I'm not suggesting it's going to be stalled forever, but it'll be slower. And with the cooler weather coming up in the last days of April, early May, we'll be a little slow drying down. So I think the bottom line is that we should just anticipate slower field progress, but it won't be so bad here in this first week. But as we get into that second week, it'll probably get a little sluggish.
By the way, it has been at least a couple of decades, probably closer to 3 than 2, and maybe longer than that you've been on the air with us. So we do thank you,
wow.
And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
All right. Well, have a good week.
You too. Drew Lerner is with World Weather Incorporated in Kansas City. You've been listening to the Closing Market Report. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason.